Hello everybody. I am not going to be moving very naturally maybe throughout this video because my neck hurts like crazy. This is already the third day of this. I would very much like for this to be over, but we will see when it actually ends up happening. It just cracked and I thought it was just going to be better now, and I'm like, oh no, it's actually back to being a little bit worse. So yay for that, I guess. But enough whining. We are here to talk about the books that I've read so far this year, I guess. This is time for the famous mid-year book freakout tag. So, I will have the creators of this in the description, but this is a tag that has been going around for a very long time and that basically most booktubers do over on BookTube. So by the time you're seeing this, you will have seen many others already tackle it, because I think I'm always like a month behind it because I actually never have this tag like really on my schedule. It's not something that I'm really thinking about when the mid-year passes, so it's just when I start seeing the tag that I'm like, oh yeah, right, I also need to do this tag video at some point, and this is my first opportunity basically to slot it in. So before we go into the tag section itself, I do want to go through some statistics about my reading for the first half of the year, as I think that this is the most like opportune time to do so. I don't really have a video planned for that separately, so I'm just going to mention it here. So I am going to make the mid-year the end of July, so I'm including July in my stats, whereas normally it's just looking at the first 6 months, but it just makes sense because we're already August that I would include July in my stats as well. So for the first 7 months of the year I have read 75 books, which is very nice. I always kind of have the 100 books as a goal in mind, and so looking at that statistic, that is going to be no issue at all. And then in terms of pages, I've read 24,306 pages so far this year. I have set the goal of like 40,000 pages, but to be fair, I don't actually care about the page count goal. I think last year I set it at like 35,000 or maybe 37,000 or something like that, and I managed that, so then I upped it a little bit, but the page goal, I don't know, it's not that important to me. I mean, the 100 books per year, I want to say, is not that important to me neither. But if I weren't to make it, probably it would be the case. But also, you know I'm going to do 100 books. I definitely don't think that that is going to be a big issue. So it's clearly also not that important of a goal for me, because otherwise I would set it to be a goal that is somewhat a reach, rather than just put it at a number that I know I'm going to hit, but that is also still a like relatively large one. In terms of the distribution of books, I do have one qualm, and one qualm that is definitely also impacting my reading at the moment. And so out of those 75 books, 36 of them were fantasy books, meaning that is half of them. You know, a little bit less, I guess 37 would be half of them, but you know, half of the reading that I've done so far this year has been fantasy books, and I feel that at this point in time. You know, when I started my channel, which is many years ago at this point in time, I was feeling like I wanted to get back into fantasy. Like I had kind of been neglecting my fantasy reading, and that I was reading a lot more sort of like classics, literary fiction, and that had kind of been taking over my reading life. And so gradually I feel like fantasy has become more of the focus, and definitely in the past few years fantasy has taken over again as like the majority genre. And even though it's only like half of the books, I definitely think that it feels like it's almost all of my reading at this point in time. It feels like I'm constantly reading fantasy, because probably realistically speaking I am constantly reading fantasy because I'm constantly reading multiple books at the same time, which probably means that there's always a fantasy on the go together with then potentially something else or a second fantasy book. I definitely won't be abandoning the fantasy. As I've indicated, most of this TBR card is still fantasy, and I want to reduce the TBR card still within the rest of this year, so I'm definitely going to be reading fantasy, but I am hoping to diversify a little bit more and to reach for other stuff outside of fantasy a little bit more. and definitely when it comes around to actually having reduced the TBR card, I'll want to kind of keep an eye on that, make sure that I'm not just filling it up with fantasy all the time. The average rating for my books is 3.78, so that is decent. It's on the higher range of the 3 stars. I would like to see it in the 4-star range, but realistically speaking, I do have clear-cut differentiations between the books that I read, and a 3-star isn't a bad rating. A 3-star is a rating that I give to a book that I like, but that just didn't blow me away, or that I didn't particularly think was like really good quality. It's just a book that I thought was decent, good, I had a good time with it, but it just didn't go beyond that. So it's only when we go under the 3 stars that we get to books where I will have had more issues with. And so I think an end of the 3-star rating is probably just realistic for me. I don't just dole out the 4 and 5 stars, especially the 5 stars. I do feel like I give out a 4-star rating quite often, and that is probably why the average is pretty close to that 4-star. But sometimes I feel like I give out even too many 4 stars, so maybe this is a good indication. And then let's talk about those 5 stars, because I actually read 8 5-star reads so far this year. I'm not going to go over them. I'm going to give you a visual over here of all 8 5-star reads. And then finally, the final stat that I have for you is the author that I read the most from so far within this year, and that is Martha Wells. Because I did a reread of Murderbot and continued on until I was caught up to the series. And so yes, I read 8 Murderbots I think this year. So I think it's going to be difficult for any author to beat her, unless potentially Tatsuya Endo for the Spy X Family series, because I have read 3 volumes in that so far, and obviously the manga volumes are as quick to go through as Murderbot novellas are. So let's go into the actual tag video now and the questions that it asks. Best book you've read so far in 2026 is going to be Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And when I was going through my reading this year, it was actually very interesting to see that this is actually a book that I read in January. So I hit it off really good in January. Actually, 2 out of my 8 5-star reads are from the month of January. So we kicked off the year. So we kicked off the year right. But so Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell is a book that revisits the life of Shakespeare, but it's actually not told through the perspective of Shakespeare. It's told through the perspective of his wife Agnes. This has been made into a movie, and that's also the reason why I read the book. So I read the book so that I could then go and see the movie, and I would definitely encourage you to read the book if you haven't seen the movie yet. If you have seen the movie, you can definitely still read the book. I definitely think that the book is superior, and that I felt some of the magic being lost within the movie. I will say the movie is very good as well, and even if you've read the book you can appreciate the movie, but I definitely think that the book is told in such a masterful way with such perfect prose that it has this whole magic entrenched within it that just comes out much stronger within the book. The movie does kind of recreate this magic through a wonderful cinematography, but it just has to lose out somewhat to the book. So in Hamlet we are looking at Agnes, the wife of Shakespeare. They basically have a little bit of a tumultuous start as their parents do not really agree to this match, because Agnes is basically this sort of like mythical being almost within their community, because her mother was basically a sage woman, let's say, who knew all about herbs and their different uses, so very close to sort of like witchy folkloric character. And then she left at some point, and these kids were raised by their father alone. And so Shakespeare falls in love with Agnes and with her energy, her spirit, and they end up thwarting their families and getting together as Agnes becomes pregnant with Shakespeare. And so we follow their lives and the lives of their kids, and we know from the beginning, because it's set within the first line or within the dedication or something like that, that Hamnet is going to pass away, but still reading the sequence that leads up to his passing is heartbreaking, heart-rendering, and was also one of the most thrilling and anxiety-inducing sequences that I've ever read. And so I definitely encourage you to read this book just for that sequence alone, because that sequence was definitely what kind of disappointed me within the movie translation of this, because within the movie it's basically like 2 minutes or so, let's say, of the movie's time, whereas I felt like this took up like 100 pages or so in the book. Probably it didn't, but it felt like it had that big of a presence within the book, and even though the timing is shorter in the movie, it could have still had that impact, but it didn't have that impact. It felt like a very small scene, and so this could of course just be that this is the scene that got me in the book, and that for other people, other scenes within the book were more important, and those scenes are the ones who maybe were more highlighted within the movie version of the book. But yeah, for me that was sort of like the highlight of the book, the culmination of feeling and of anxiety and panic. And so I had a really engrossed experience with this book, and I absolutely fell in love with the prose of Maggie O'Farrell, and so I will definitely be checking out other books by her. She has a new book out called Land that I haven't got around to yet. It is on my radar, but it's also not necessarily really like a priority yet, because of the fact that I'm trying to reduce the TBR further first. No, those, I have to say that I didn't actually get Hamnet physically. I listened to it as an audiobook through my library, so I could probably do the same for Land as well, and so maybe that will be coming up in the months to come. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far this year, and I'm going to give that to Ride a Rising Storm by Monocle Black Goose. This is a sequel to Shape, A Dragon's Breath, and the series is called Numpa She Wasted. So this is a series in which we're looking at a Native American girl who basically has a dragon egg who that comes out and latches onto her, let's say, and this is the first dragon who has been hatched to a native population, and so she is the first native girl to be allowed to go to this academy where she will learn to become a dragon rider. There is a native boy over there, but he is a native boy who has been raised within a Western society, and so he has not been brought up within the customs of his people. And so this series is going to look at the clash within these two societies, the viewpoints of these two societies, the pressure she feels to represent her society, but at the same time also to comply and adjust to the Western society that she is now being thrust into, because this is the expectations that people have of her. This is the way that they're trying to push her into, and so it's very much a series about her trying to go against that, trying to remain who she has always been, trying to remain true to herself and to her people and to her values and her customs. And it's also a lovely series about friendship and development of friendship, development of people who have their values, values that they have held all their lives, because they've always been told or taught that these are the ways to see things, to look at things, to do things, and I just really enjoy it. The first one I think I was still a little bit on the fence about, because the style is just so different from what I had expected, because it very much feels like a fantasy of manners, like an elite border school in like the 18th century or something like that. But I definitely did enjoy it a lot, and I definitely enjoyed this second one a lot, because this second one took all of my doubts away. I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed so much being within this character and within her views and within her strength, because even though she has to deal with a lot of tension and a lot of pressure from the people around her to present a certain image of a native girl and to, like, you know, show the value of her people. All of these pressures are constantly mounted on her. She, as a character, is very confident in who she is as a person and is very much able to stick to that at this point in time. And so I really enjoyed that, and I also enjoyed the exploration we have in here of sort of like romantic feelings, but also of different views on relationships and on openness when it comes to relationships between her worldview and the worldview of the people around her. And simultaneously, this book also deals with a lot more sort of like political pressure, as we see that pressure on the native population is increasing in the sense that there is a lot more oversight. Whereas before, the native population was kind of like ignored, left to their own devices, left to themselves. Now we see a lot more interference coming from the mainland into native society, and so we'll be looking at that as well. I really much enjoyed this one, and I'm very much looking forward to the sequel. I don't know when the next book is going to be coming out within the series, but I'm hoping it'll be soon, because now this definitely will become a priority read. The next question is a new release that you have yet to get to, and I'm going to be choosing one that is on my TBR for that, and that is The Last Contract of Isako by Fonda Lee. I was expecting to pick this up like immediately when I got it, and it is August and we still haven't gotten to it, and I don't know whether it's going to be for this month, but because now that we're going into the final section of this year, I'm definitely sort of like prioritizing the older stuff on my TBR at this point in time, because those have to be finished before the end of 2026. But so this is a sort of like last job type of book in which we're looking at this assassin or hired gun or whatever she is, and her final job. She is over 50 years I think old, and that's all I really know about it. Fonda Lee is the author of the Greenbone Saga, which is an amazing trilogy in case you haven't checked it out yet, and so I needed nothing more than her name to get me interested in this book. And then that whole idea of sort of like one last job is definitely a concept that I definitely enjoy, so hopefully this is going to be as amazing as I think it is going to be, but I do have to find some time for it and slot it in somewhere. In similar vein, the next question is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So I think my most anticipated releases that are still coming at this point in time are Our Cut of Salt by Dina Helm, which is a Palestinian book that's going to be looking at Israeli colonizers and the idea of sort of like a haunted house through that framework, which sounds very amazing to me. Peck and Peck by Bonnie Garmus, just because it's Bonnie Garmus. So I don't know anything about this book anymore, but Bonnie Garmus is the author of Lessons in Chemistry, which I absolutely adored when that came out, so I'm very much looking forward to picking up her next book and figuring out whether she is a author by author from now on, or whether, you know, Lessons in Chemistry was a one-off. And then my favorite author is also coming out with a book later this year, which is In One Brief Moment All Eternity by Elif Shafak. So I have mixed feelings about this one, and that is just because it is kind of framed as a Madame Bovary retelling, and Madame Bovary is not a book that I particularly enjoyed, but Elif Shafak can do no wrong in my book. You know, like, my biggest disappointment by her was maybe a 3.5 star or something like that, right? So, you know, I expect that I'm gonna love it regardless. She describes it as her love letter to literature. I have read the premise, but I've already forgotten, because definitely when it comes to premises, I try to do that. And with my wonky memory, it's actually pretty easy for me to do that. So I do remember that it looked like it could be more than just a Gustave Flaubert retelling. I think it was something with like Gustave Flaubert's pen falling into somebody else's hands or something like that. So, you know, I'm expecting a lot. I love Elif Shafak's writing. She has such a way with words and is always telling impactful stories, so I'm expecting this one to be nothing less. Biggest disappointment of the year so far. For that, I'm gonna go with a book that I no longer have. I've already gifted it to somebody else, and that is Agnes Obeyer's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. This by no means is the worst book that I've read this year so far. That's not what this question is. It's the biggest disappointment, and I'm guessing I'm going to put this book in this category because of the fact that I was expecting to like it, at least to love it, and definitely because it's a book about a cat shelter. How could I not love it, right? Unfortunately, I did not. Unfortunately, it was just like a meh, not that interested, it's okay type of read, where I don't necessarily have anything against it. The thing that I have against it is the fact that it didn't make me love it, when it's a book that in principle implies that it's about a cat shelter. And I think that that is my major quarrel with it, because Yes, you could say it's a book about a cat shelter, but also in so many ways it's not a book about a cat shelter, because the cat shelter is just sort of like the device, the plot device that gets the story started. Basically, she is the owner of a cat shelter, and due to mages battling it out within the street of that shelter, the shelter is now gone to disarray and it can no longer be rebuilt, and so she has to find a new location to rent in order to move her cats and the shelter over there. It is a little bit of a financially difficult time for her because she was always just making ends meet, and so now she'll have to find a new location, move the cats there, build up new clientele, hopefully get enough donations and stuff like that to keep the shelter running. And she is sort of like unnaturally appealed to this one location, even though the price range of that location would probably be outside of her limits. But she does go there in the end and is allowed to rent a space, but it turns out to be because they kind of need a cover for the presence of magical elements. And you know, the cat shelter and placing the shelter there is kind of a plot device to get the story started. And don't get me wrong, we do get a few there are cats there, of course. We do have some events taking place in terms of like adopting cats and stuff like that, but there's far too little attention paid to the cats, and also I didn't really get a feel for any of these cats, you know, like you get to know some of these cats, sure, but I didn't overwhelmingly feel like this is a book about cats, this is a book by a cat lover, this is like real cat behavior. I didn't really get that sense, you know, nothing about the cats really stuck with me, and that is just really a shame considering it's a book that has cats in the title. Moving on to the biggest surprise of the year, and that's gonna go to The Girl with the 1,000 Faces by Sunyi Dean. So Sunyi Dean is the author of The Book Eaters, which is a book that I did get in the Illumicrate subscription, and this is a book that I got in the Broken Binding SFF. And this is such a surprise for me, and a pleasant one, because I kind of liked the vibes of The Book Eaters, but I didn't end up liking the story or the writing, I don't think so, and I loved this. So when I originally got this, I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with giving her another chance. There were things about The Book Eaters that I liked, but I would have never picked this one up on my own, right? But this one absolutely took me by storm. For a while there, I was thinking it was going to be a book that I was going to give 5 stars, but actually, for me, this book had this high point, sort of like 2/3 of the way in, I guess, and then it kind of fizzled out a little bit. This is definitely not everybody's experience. I know people who have given it that 5-star rating, for example, but for me it just kind of fizzled out towards the end, and I kind of lost a little bit of my excitement for it towards the end, and so that's why it ended up just being a 4.5 star. But this was a book that I would not have given a chance otherwise, and that ended up working really well for me. So this is a story about a woman, she's also in her 50s, I think, maybe even older, and she basically is somebody with a mysterious past, because she ended up on a boat and she doesn't really remember, or she's kind of suppressed the memories of before. She just knows that she was coming from an island and was taken in as a refugee aboard this boat. And she has this power to speak to spirits, and so basically she is a spirit talker trying to talk to spirits and resolve their unresolved issues, and she's not against like allowing them to resolve them in a little bit of a violent manner if she feels like the people who harmed them have it coming. But the story will go into much more than that. We'll obviously be diving into that mysterious past of her, and there is some twists and turns in this that I think worked really well and were just really amazing, and some thematics and stuff like that that I just really enjoyed about this book. And so I had a really great time with it, and I didn't really expect it going into it, so that's why it's my perfect candidate for this question. The camera is already indicating that it's gonna overheat. Please, please, please make it to the end. Favorite new author, debut or new to you? I always hate this question because I cannot make a decision about a favorite new author based off of like one book, and so I think my conclusion for this book is, I think my conclusion for this question is going to be Tea Kingfisher. I read 2 Tea Kingfishers this year. One is a sequel to Paladin's Great Paladin's Strength and the other is Snake Eater. Both of these I gave 4.5 stars, so this is now my 4th Tea Kingfisher, I want to say, maybe 5th. I have enjoyed most of them, but I definitely got to appreciate her works, or their works, within the last 3 books I read by them, and so yeah, this is definitely an author that I want to explore more of the back catalogue of, want to keep up with a little bit more and just read more, but they also have a ton of books out there, so it's also a little bit difficult to keep up. Most of them are pretty short, but it is also like, oh yeah, another Tea Kingfisher has just come out. Okay, time to get to it, right? But you know, it's also not a bad thing to never get to the entire back catalogue. But I definitely think that this has cemented that I do enjoy their writing, and that also their stories are different enough from one another for me to enjoy, because previously, I don't know, I had it kind of in my mind that they were more or less the same stories most of the time. Ah yeah, 5th one, because I have read another book by her, The House with Good Bones or something like that, and I did not enjoy that one that much, so maybe that is also why I was so tentative going into this one particularly, because, you know, Paladin's Strength was a sequel, so I knew that I was most likely going to like it. But now I'm back on the positive side of like, yeah. Most of the books by Tea Kingfisher that I've read, I've really enjoyed a lot, so I want to keep on exploring their works. Newest favorite character has to be Finley Ash Owen from The House Witch by Dellenbach. So this is a cozy fantasy in which we're following a cook who, like a new cook to the castle. He is secretly a witch because witches are very much looked down upon within this world. So Finley Ash Owen is a house witch, and which means that basically his power has to do with all things domestic, but also with protecting his house. And now that he's made his house a castle, it seems like that power is going to be growing. I love Finley Ash Owen because in principle he's the type of character who likes to be left to his own devices, because he knows the prejudices that people have against witches, but somehow he finds himself embroiled in all of these different adventures and schemes, and finds himself being the center of attention to some extent, having like even the king start to really grow to love him. So I love this character, and I wish nothing but the best for him, and wish I could hang out with him as well, and definitely wish I could eat some of his amazing cooking. Next we get Book That Made You Cry, Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. We need not speak further on it, we know. Book That Made You Happy. Of course I could go for The House Witch, because that absolutely made me happy, but I decided to go for Spy X Family, which is a manga series in which we're looking at a sort of like fabricated family, because we're looking at this spy who basically needs to infiltrate a prestigious academy in order to be able to approach the father of one of the newly attending kids there, because this father is a recluse figure who basically you never see, and so he is basically only like at this one function a year that is part of this school, and so he has to build a makeshift family in order to be able to attend that particular ceremony and be able to you know, approach his targets. Now his make-pretend family turns out to be as exciting as he is, because he chooses a daughter who is a telepath, though he does not know that, and a wife who's an assassin, though he does not know that, and she does not know that he's a spy. So I enjoyed the series a whole lot so far. I've only read the first 3 installments of the manga series, so I do definitely want to continue, and I am definitely enjoying their adventures and the misadventures, but also the growing love and tenderness between the members of this particular found family. So yes, that is a book that definitely makes me happy. Penultimate question, most beautiful book you've got this year, and for that we have a real beauty to bring out. That is, of course, Broken Binding Edition, and it is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. Look at this. This is absolutely to die for. I absolutely love this edition. Got beautiful sprayed edges, got a under beautiful. Trying to balance this book, trying to go halfway when I should be going all the way, right? Beautiful end papers, like this edition is to die for. This is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, which is a first book in the series. That is the Bone Shard War, right? Actually, what is the series called? The Drowning Empire, actually, right? Where is it? I think it's called The Drowning Empire, which is basically a series in which we are looking at the daughter to the emperor. Every person has to donate a bone when they're a certain age, and the royal family uses these bones to make constructs that they can then breathe life into. But this magic has never been passed down to her because she's only a daughter, right? I really enjoyed the first 2 books in this installment, and I never finished. And so when this edition was announced, I was like, first of all, I need it. Even though I hated this book, I would have felt like I needed it, but I knew that I liked these first 2 books at least. And so I'm hoping to finish out the series probably next year rather than this year. And then the final question is, which books do you still need to read by the end of this year? And you can expect a full video on those because I have 6 more books that I acquired in 2025. And if you know me, then you know that I have this rule that whatever ends up on my TBR needs to be read within a 1-year time period. I'm actually thinking about reducing that a little bit further within 2027, but for the time being we'll stick to the 1-year time period. And so yes, I have to read 6 more books by the end of 2026 because they are books that made it into my TBR before the end of 2025. And so yeah, the first one of those needs to be read before September, which means that it needs to be read this month still. But so yeah, this was the mid-year book tag. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys for a future one. Bye!